The rain came down in sheets over Port Viridia, turning the cobblestone streets of the historic district into slick, black mirrors. Marla Vasquez stood under the narrow awning of Prestige Estates, her tablet clutched to her chest, watching the valet scramble to cover the leather seats of a client's Maserati. She had been standing there for 7 minutes, waiting for a gap in the downpour, when the glass door behind her swung open, and the scent of expensive cologne rolled out like a fog. "Still here, Vasquez?" The voice belonged to Derek Holm, senior acquisitions agent and resident golden boy. He didn't wait for an answer. He shouldered past her, popping open an umbrella that probably cost more than her monthly car payment. "Thought you'd be out showing that studio on Faro. Oh wait, that listing got reassigned, didn't it?" Marla's jaw tightened. The Faro listing had been hers. She'd nurtured the lead for 6 weeks, walking the nervous first-time seller through comps, staging consultations, and market trends. Then Derek had mentioned to their managing broker that the seller seemed uncomfortable with Marla's appearance, and just like that, the listing was transferred. No hearing, no appeal. "I'm meeting a new client," Marla said, keeping her voice even. "Walk in." Derek laughed, a short, sharp sound. "A walk-in, at Prestige, in this rain." "Sure, Marla. Good luck with that." He strode into the parking lot, shoes splashing through puddles, and disappeared into his silver coupe. Marla exhaled slowly, counting to 5 in her head. She was 34 years old, had been in real estate for 11 years, and held a master's degree in architectural history. She had closed 42 transactions in the past 18 months, more than Derek and his cronies combined. But none of that mattered in the office. What mattered was the way her hips filled out her pencil skirt, the way her blouse strained over her chest, the way her round cheeks flushed when she was nervous. In the world of luxury real estate, where agents were expected to look like mannequins, Marla was a size 18 woman with curves that refused to be hidden, and that made her a target. She checked her reflection in the rain-streaked glass. Dark hair pulled back in a low bun, gold hoop earrings, a deep burgundy blazer she'd saved 3 months to buy. Her makeup was minimal but precise. She'd learned long ago that any hint of glamour was met with whispers of trying too hard, while a bare face was unprofessional. She walked a tightrope every single day, and she was exhausted. The door chimed behind her. "Ms. Vasquez?" Marla turned. The man standing in the doorway was not what she expected. He was older, mid-60s perhaps, with a full head of silver hair swept back from a lined, distinguished face. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him like a second skin, and his eyes, pale gray, almost colorless, held a stillness that made the hair on her arms stand up. Behind him, a younger man in a black overcoat held an umbrella over both their heads, his expression blank. "I'm Marla Vasquez," she said, extending her hand. "How can I help you?" The older man took her hand. His grip was cool and dry, and he held on a beat too long. "My name is Adrian Cross. I was told you're the agent to speak with about waterfront properties." Marla's pulse ticked up. Waterfront in Port Viridia meant 7-figure listings at minimum. "I specialize in historic and waterfront estates, yes. Would you like to come inside and discuss what you're looking for?" Adrian Cross smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'd prefer to show you the property I'm interested in. It's not on the market yet, but I believe it will be soon. I want someone who can assess it before the listing goes live." "I can certainly do that," Marla said, her mind already racing through off-market opportunities. "Which property?" "The Ashford Estate, on Cormorant Point." Marla's stomach dropped. The Ashford Estate was legendary in Port Viridia, a sprawling Gilded Age mansion built in 1892 by a shipping magnate, perched on a rocky promontory overlooking the bay. It had been vacant for 12 years. tangled in probate litigation between feuding heirs. If it was finally coming to market, it would be the biggest listing of the decade. "I know the property well," Marla said carefully. "It's been tied up in court for years." "The litigation resolved last month," Adrian Cross said. "The estate will be listed within 60 days. I intend to purchase it before that happens. I need an agent who understands old buildings, not just their charm, but their bones, their secrets." Secrets. The word hung in the damp air between them. "I have a master's in architectural history," Marla said. "I've studied buildings like Ashford my entire career." "I know," Adrian Cross said. "That's why I asked for you." Marla should have felt flattered. Instead, she felt a cold prickle at the back of her neck. She ignored it. She'd been ignored and overlooked for so long that suspicion felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. "Let me grab my coat," she said. The drive to Cormorant Point took 40 minutes. Marla followed Adrian Cross's black sedan in her own modest hatchback, the windshield wipers working overtime against the relentless rain. The road wound along the coastline, past shuttered summer homes and rocky beaches, until the trees parted and the Ashford estate rose before her like a stone ghost. It was magnificent. Even in the gray, weeping light, the mansion commanded the landscape. 3 stories of granite and limestone, with a mansard roof dotted by dormer windows, a wraparound porch supported by Corinthian columns, and a turret on the eastern corner that faced the open sea. The grounds were overgrown. Rhododendrons had swallowed the garden paths, and ivy crawled up the north wall like green veins. But the bones were there. The bones were spectacular. Marla parked behind the sedan and stepped out into the rain, her umbrella fighting the wind. Adrian Cross was already at the front door. A massive oak slab carved with nautical motifs, anchors, ropes, mermaids. He produced a key from his pocket and unlocked it with a smooth turn. "The heirs gave you access?" Marla asked, climbing the steps. "The heirs are motivated," Adrian Cross said. "They know I'm a serious buyer." The interior was dark and cold, smelling of dust and old wood, and something faintly metallic. Marla's heels echoed on the marble floor of the grand foyer as she stepped inside, her eyes adjusting to the dimness. A chandelier hung overhead, draped in a canvas cover like a shrouded corpse. To her left, a sweeping staircase curved up to a second-floor gallery. To her right, a cavernous living room with floor-to-ceiling windows that faced the bay. "The electricity is off," Adrian Cross said, "but I brought flashlights." He handed her a heavy-duty maglite. "I'd like you to walk the property. Take your time. Tell me what you see." Marla clicked on the flashlight and began her inspection. She moved through the ground floor methodically, her trained eye cataloging details. The original crown molding, hand-carved and intact. The fireplace surrounds, imported Italian marble, with hairline cracks that suggested foundation settling. The hardwood floors, oak with walnut inlays, warped in the northwest corner from water intrusion. She noted everything, speaking aloud as she went. "The roof is likely compromised above the northwest wing," she said, running her hand along a wall that felt cool and slightly damp. "You can smell the mildew. The gutters are probably clogged, which means water is backing up and seeping into the walls. That's a 6-figure repair, minimum." Adrian Cross followed her in silence, his pale eyes tracking her every movement. They moved to the second floor. Bedrooms, bathrooms, a library with built-in shelves that still held leather-bound books. Marla paused in the library, her flashlight beam catching the spines. Maritime law, shipping manifests, naval architecture, the original owner's collection. "The heirs left everything?" she asked. "They took what they wanted. The rest is part of the sale." Marla nodded and continued. The third floor was smaller, with servants' quarters and a narrow staircase leading to the turret room. She climbed it, her thighs burning, and emerged into a circular space with windows on all sides. The view was breathtaking. The bay churning gray and white, the sky heavy with clouds, the distant lights of Port Viridia twinkling through the rain. This would be the jewel of the listing, Marla said. Staged correctly, this room alone could add $200,000 to the asking price. Adrian Cross stood in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the dim light from below. What about the basement? I haven't seen it yet. It's important, he said. The original owner used it for wine storage. There's also a root cellar and what the heirs called a storm room. I want your opinion on the foundation. Marla nodded and followed him back down through the house. The basement stairs were tucked behind the kitchen, narrow and steep, and the air grew colder with each step. The maglite beam cut through the darkness, revealing stone walls, a dirt floor, and wooden shelving units that had long since rotted away. The basement was larger than she expected, stretching the full footprint of the house. She moved slowly, checking the foundation walls for cracks, the floor for signs of water pooling. The storm room was at the far end, a heavy steel door set into the stone. That's unusual, Marla murmured. What is? A steel door in a 19th century basement. Storm rooms from this era typically had wooden doors with cross bracing. Steel would have been prohibitively expensive and difficult to install. She ran her hand over the door's surface. This isn't original. It's modern. Installed within the last decade, I'd guess. Adrian Cross said nothing. Marla tried the handle. It was locked. Do you have the key? The heirs didn't provide one. They said the room was empty. Marla frowned. She stepped back, shining her flashlight along the wall adjacent to the storm room. Something was off. The proportions were wrong. She'd walked the entire basement, and by her internal measurements, the storm room should extend at least 15 feet. But the wall next to the door was only about 8 feet wide before it met the perpendicular foundation wall. There's a discrepancy, she said. What kind of discrepancy? The dimensions don't add up. This wall, she pointed to the stone wall beside the steel door, should be longer. Based on the footprint of the house above, the basement should extend another 7 or 8 feet in this direction. But it doesn't. Adrian Cross tilted his head. Perhaps the foundation steps in. No, Marla said, her voice firmer now. I've studied the original plans for Ashford. I wrote my thesis on Gilded Age waterfront architecture in Port Viridia. The Ashford estate was one of my case studies. The basement is a full rectangle. There's no step-in. There's a missing room. Silence filled the basement, thick and heavy. A missing room, Adrian Cross repeated. Yes, and I think the storm room is a facade. It's too small. The steel door is a distraction. The real hidden space is behind this wall. She pressed her palm against the cold stone. Someone built a false wall down here, and they did it recently enough that the mortar doesn't match the original. Adrian Cross stepped closer, his flashlight joining hers. The two beams illuminated the mortar lines. Marla was right. The mortar on the suspicious wall was lighter, less weathered, with a slightly different composition. Ms. Vasquez, Adrian Cross said quietly, I believe you've just earned your commission. 3 days later, Marla sat in the Prestige Estates conference room, surrounded by people who wanted her to fail. Derek Holm was there, arms crossed, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. Beside him sat Vanessa Cho, the managing broker, her expression carefully neutral. At the head of the table was Adrian Cross, dressed in a black suit with a crisp white shirt, his silver hair gleaming under the recessed lighting. Next to him sat a man Marla hadn't met before, Julian Voss, Adrian's personal attorney. He was younger than Adrian, maybe 45, with dark hair slicked back and eyes that moved too quickly, never settling on anything for long. Ms. Vasquez has raised a concern about the Ashford property, Adrian Cross said, his voice calm and measured. She believes there's a hidden room in the basement that doesn't appear on any of the current floor plans. Derek snorted. A hidden room? What is this? A Nancy Drew novel? Marla ignored him. She spread the original 1892 blueprints across the table, alongside the modern floor plan the heirs had provided. The original plans show a full rectangular basement measuring 62 feet by 48 feet. The current floor plan shows the same footprint, but the storm room accounts for only a fraction of the eastern end. There's approximately 300 square feet unaccounted for. Vanessa leaned forward, her brow furrowed. Could it be a drafting error? No, Marla said. I verified the measurements against the original building permits, the 1912 renovation permits, and the 1987 historical registry documentation. The basement has always been a full rectangle. The false wall was added sometime after 1987. Julian Voss spoke for the first time. His voice was smooth, almost oily. Ms. Vasquez, I appreciate your attention to detail, but I think you're overcomplicating this. The heirs have owned the property for decades. If there were a hidden room, they would know about it. Would they? Marla asked. The heirs have been fighting in court for 12 years. None of them have lived in the house since the 1990s. The property has been vacant, accessible to contractors, surveyors, and who knows else. Someone could have modified the basement without the heirs' knowledge. To what end? Julian asked, his eyes narrowing. I don't know yet, Marla admitted, but I think we should find out before Mr. Cross commits to a purchase. Derek laughed. This is ridiculous. You're holding up a multi-million-dollar deal because you think there's a secret room. You're just trying to make yourself look important. Derek, Vanessa said warningly. No, I'm serious, Derek continued. She's been desperate for a big listing for years. Now she finally gets one, and she's manufacturing drama to stay in the spotlight. It's pathetic. Marla felt the familiar heat rise to her cheeks, but she forced herself to stay calm. I'm not manufacturing anything. I'm doing my job, a job that requires more than a firm handshake and a leased BMW. Derek's smirk vanished. Watch yourself, Vasquez. Enough, Adrian Cross said. His voice was soft, but it cut through the room like a blade. Everyone fell silent. Ms. Vasquez, what do you need to confirm your suspicions? I need access to the basement with proper equipment, Marla said. Ground-penetrating radar if possible, or at minimum, a structural engineer who can assess the wall without damaging it. I can arrange that, Adrian said. Adrian, Julian interjected, leaning forward. I really must advise against this. The sellers are already skittish. If we start drilling holes in their basement, they might pull the deal entirely. Then we'll be discreet, Adrian said. Ms. Vasquez, you'll have your equipment by Friday. Julian's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. That evening, Marla sat in her small apartment, surrounded by paperwork. She'd pulled every document she could find on the Ashford estate: building permits, renovation records, property tax assessments, historical society archives. She'd also started researching Adrian Cross, and what she found made her hands tremble. Adrian Cross was not a legitimate businessman. He was the head of the Cross organization, a criminal enterprise with interests in smuggling, money laundering, and, according to some sources, arms trafficking. He'd been investigated by the FBI multiple times, but never charged. Witnesses had a habit of disappearing or changing their stories. Rivals had a habit of turning up dead. Marla closed her laptop and pressed her palms against her eyes. She'd stumbled into something far more dangerous than a real estate deal. The hidden room in the Ashford basement wasn't a quirk of architecture. It was something else, something intentional. And if Adrian Cross was involved, it was almost certainly something illegal. She thought about walking away. She could call Vanessa in the morning, claim a family emergency, and hand the listing back to Derek. Let him deal with the hidden room and the Mafia boss and the lawyer with the shifty eyes. But then she thought about Derek's smirk, Vanessa's neutrality, the years of being overlooked, underestimated, mocked for her body, and dismissed for her thoroughness. She thought about the Faro listing, stolen from her without cause. She thought about every client who'd asked for a different agent after seeing her in person. She wasn't walking away. Not this time. Friday arrived gray and cold. Marla drove to Cormorant Point with a knot in her stomach, her car loaded with equipment, a laser measuring tool, a thermal imaging camera she'd borrowed from a contractor friend, and a portable borescope with a flexible cable that could snake through small openings. She'd also brought reinforcements. Frank DeMarco was waiting for her at the estate gate, leaning against his pickup truck with a thermos of coffee in his hand. He was 72 years old, with a weathered face, thick white eyebrows, and hands that had spent 40 years inspecting buildings for the city of Port Viridia. He'd retired a decade ago, but he still consulted on historic preservation projects, and he was one of the few people in the industry who'd ever treated Marla with respect. "Hell of a place," Frank said, eyeing the mansion. "Haven't been out here since '09. The roof was failing then. Can't imagine it's improved." "The roof is the least of my concerns," Marla said. She handed him a copy of the blueprints. "I need you to look at the basement with me. There's a wall that doesn't belong." Frank studied the plans, his bushy eyebrows drawing together. "You're right. The math doesn't work. Someone's hiding something." They entered the house together. Adrian Cross was already inside, standing in the grand foyer with Julian Voss at his side. Julian looked unhappy, his arms crossed, his foot tapping against the marble floor. "Ms. Vasquez," Adrian said, "I see you've brought company." "Frank DeMarco," Marla said, "retired city building inspector. He's forgotten more about structural engineering than most people ever learn." Frank nodded at Adrian, seemingly unbothered by the man's reputation. "Let's see this basement." The four of them descended the narrow stairs, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Marla led them to the false wall, her heart pounding. She'd been right 3 days ago, but being right in front of a Mafia boss and his hostile lawyer was a different kind of pressure. Frank ran his hands over the stone, his expression intent. "Mortar's definitely newer. See the color? Original is lime-based. This is Portland cement. Maybe 10, 15 years old. And the stonework is too clean. Original foundation has irregular stones. These are cut to fit." "Can you tell what's behind it?" Adrian asked. "Let's find out," Frank said. He pulled a small hammer from his belt and tapped along the wall, listening to the sound. Near the center, the tap produced a hollow echo. "There's a cavity here. Big one." Marla set up the thermal imaging camera, aiming it at the wall. The screen flickered to life, showing a gradient of blues and greens, and a distinct rectangular shape in orange and red. "There's a temperature differential. The cavity is warmer than the surrounding stone. That means it's insulated, or there's something inside generating heat." "Like what?" Julian asked, his voice tight. "Could be electrical equipment," Marla said. "Could be something else." She pulled out the borescope, a thin cable with a camera at the tip. Frank helped her find a gap in the mortar near the floor, just wide enough to feed the cable through. The screen on Marla's tablet flickered as the camera snaked into the darkness. For a moment, there was nothing, just blackness, and the occasional glint of the camera's LED light reflecting off stone. Then the image resolved, and Marla's blood ran cold. The hidden room was not empty. It was furnished. A narrow cot with a thin mattress, a metal toilet in the corner, a small sink, shelves stocked with canned food and water bottles, and on the far wall, a heavy steel door with a locking mechanism on the outside. "Oh my God," Marla whispered. Adrian Cross stepped closer, his pale eyes fixed on the screen. His expression didn't change, but something in the air around him shifted. A cold, dangerous stillness that made the basement feel 10 degrees colder. "What is that?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "It's a holding cell," Frank said bluntly. "Soundproofed, off-grid, hidden from view. Someone built a prison in this basement." Julian Voss took a step back. "This is absurd. The heirs must have." "The heirs didn't build this," Marla interrupted. She was scrolling through the borescope footage, her mind racing. "Look at the construction. The electrical work is modern, code compliant within the last decade. The ventilation system is professional grade. This wasn't a DIY project. This was built by someone with resources and expertise." She turned to face Adrian Cross. "Mr. Cross, someone knew you were interested in this property. Someone prepared this room in advance. If you had purchased this house without knowing about this space, anyone could have been held here, including you." The silence that followed was absolute. Adrian Cross turned his head slowly, his gaze settling on Julian Voss. "Julian, you were the one who brought this property to my attention." Julian's face went pale. "Adrian, I had no idea. I swear. The heirs contacted me. I did my due diligence." "Your due diligence," Adrian repeated. "You're my attorney. You're supposed to protect me from exactly this kind of threat. And yet, a real estate agent I met 3 days ago found something you missed." "I didn't miss it," Julian said, his voice rising. "There was nothing to miss. She's making this up. The footage is right there," Marla said, holding up the tablet. "The room exists. The question is, who built it and why?" Adrian Cross moved. It was a small movement, just a step toward Julian, but it carried the weight of an avalanche. "I've been looking for a traitor in my organization for 6 months. Someone has been feeding information to the Moretti family. Deals have gone bad. Shipments have been intercepted. 3 of my men are dead because someone talked when they shouldn't have." Julian's hand twitched toward his jacket. "Don't," Adrian said. Frank DeMarco, who had been standing quietly by the wall, suddenly moved with surprising speed. His hand closed around Julian's wrist, twisting it behind his back. The lawyer yelped in pain, and something clattered to the floor. A small pistol, matte black and deadly. "Well, that settles that," Frank said mildly. Adrian Cross looked at Marla. His pale eyes were unreadable, but there was something new in them, something that might have been respect. "Ms. Vasquez, it seems you've saved my life." Marla's throat was dry. "I was just doing my job." "You did more than your job. You saw something no one else saw. You trusted your instincts when everyone told you to stay quiet." He stepped closer, and Marla had to fight the urge to step back. "I don't forget things like that." The aftermath was swift and brutal. Julian Voss was taken away by men who arrived in black SUVs within 20 minutes of Adrian's phone call. Marla didn't ask where they were taking him. She didn't want to know. The Ashford estate was pulled from the market. Adrian Cross had no interest in purchasing a house that had been designed as a trap. But he didn't disappear from Marla's life. In fact, he became a constant presence. A week after the basement discovery, Marla arrived at Prestige Estates to find her desk moved. It was no longer in the cramped corner near the copy machine. It was now in a private office, with a window, a mahogany desk, and a nameplate on the door that read, Marla Vasquez, Senior Acquisitions Agent. Derek Holm was gone. His desk was empty, his nameplate removed. Vanessa Cho offered no explanation, but her demeanor toward Marla had shifted from neutral to nervously deferential. "Mr. Cross's office called," Vanessa said, stopping by Marla's new office that morning. "He wants you to handle all of his real estate acquisitions going forward, commercial and residential. He's also referring several associates to you." Marla nodded, keeping her expression calm. Inside, she was reeling. She'd gone from the office pariah to the most protected agent in Port Viridia, all because she'd noticed a wall that was 7 feet too short. Adrian Cross himself appeared that afternoon. He walked into Prestige Estates like he owned the place, which Marla realized he probably could if he wanted to. The other agents scattered like startled birds. He ignored them all, heading straight for Marla's office. "Ms. Vasquez, Mr. Cross." He sat down in the chair across from her desk, crossing one leg over the other. He was dressed in a navy suit today, with a silver tie that matched his hair. He looked like a CEO. He looked like a predator. "I wanted to thank you again," he said, properly. "You've already thanked me," Marla said. "The office, the referrals, it's more than enough." "It's not." He leaned forward, his pale eyes intense. "Julian Voss has been working with the Moretti family for 2 years. He was the one who suggested the Ashford estate. The plan was for me to purchase it, use it as a safe house, and eventually be taken there under false pretenses. Once I was inside, the hidden room would have become my prison. The Morettis would have used me as leverage to dismantle my organization piece by piece." Marla's stomach turned. And Julian would have helped them. Julian would have been rewarded handsomely. He would have taken over my legal operations, laundered their money, and lived a very comfortable life while I rotted in that basement. Adrian's voice was calm, but there was a darkness underneath it, a cold fury that made the air in the office feel heavy. "You prevented that. A woman who was mocked by her colleagues, overlooked by her industry, and dismissed as desperate, saved my life, because she paid attention when no one else did." Marla didn't know what to say. "I want you to understand something," Adrian continued. "You are under my protection now. Anyone who threatens you, undermines you, or disrespects you will answer to me. That includes anyone in this office, anyone in this city, and anyone in my world." "I don't need protection," Marla said, though her voice wavered. "Everyone needs protection," Adrian said. "The question is whether they have it. You have it now, whether you want it or not." He stood up, smoothing his jacket. "I'll be in touch about the Harbor District acquisition. I want your analysis by Monday." And then he was gone, leaving Marla alone in her new office, her heart pounding and her mind spinning. Over the next several weeks, Marla's life transformed. She handled 6 transactions for Adrian Cross and his associates, each one more lucrative than the last. Her commission checks were larger than anything she'd ever earned, and her reputation in Port Viridia's real estate community skyrocketed. The same agents who had once mocked her now sought her advice. The same clients who had once requested someone else now asked for her by name. But it wasn't just the money or the status. It was the way Adrian Cross looked at her, the way he always seemed to be nearby, even when he wasn't, the way his hand would brush against hers when he handed her documents, the way his voice would soften when he said her name. Marla had never been the object of anyone's obsession before. She'd been ignored, overlooked, and dismissed. She'd been the funny friend, the smart colleague, the great personality. She'd never been the woman a man like Adrian Cross couldn't stop thinking about. It was intoxicating. It was terrifying. One evening, after a late meeting at his waterfront office, Adrian invited her to dinner. Not a business dinner. A real dinner. At a small Italian restaurant tucked away in the old district, with candlelight and wine, and no paperwork in sight. "I want to know more about you," he said, pouring her a glass of Barolo. "Not the agent. The woman." Marla laughed nervously. "There's not much to tell. I'm not very interesting." "You're the most interesting person I've met in years," Adrian said. "You see things other people miss. You trust your instincts. You don't back down, even when everyone is telling you you're wrong." He paused, his pale eyes holding hers. "And you're beautiful. I don't know why no one has told you that before, but they should have." Marla's cheeks flushed. "People don't usually say that to women who look like me." "Then people are fools," Adrian said simply. "I've spent my life surrounded by beautiful, empty people. Models, actresses, socialites. They're interchangeable. You're not. You're real. You're substantial. You're the kind of woman who saves a man's life, and then apologizes for inconveniencing him." Marla looked down at her plate, her heart hammering. "What do you want from me, Mr. Cross?" "Adrian," he corrected. "And I want what any man wants. Someone who sees him clearly. Someone who isn't afraid. Someone who stays." "I'm not afraid of you," Marla said, and it was mostly true. "I know," Adrian said. "That's why I can't stop thinking about you." The relationship that developed between them was not conventional. Adrian Cross was not a man who did things conventionally. He sent cars to pick her up, gifts that appeared on her doorstep without explanation, security details that followed her at a discreet distance. He called her at odd hours, his voice low and intense, asking about her day, her thoughts, her dreams. Marla knew she should be wary. She knew what he was, what he did, what he was capable of. But she also knew how he looked at her, not as a possession, but as something precious, something worth protecting. 3 months after the Ashford discovery, Adrian took her back to Cormorant Point. The estate was still vacant, still tangled in legal complications, but the gate was open, and the driveway had been cleared. "Why are we here?" Marla asked, as they pulled up to the mansion. "I bought it," Adrian said. Marla stared at him. "You bought the house that was supposed to be your prison." "I bought the house that you saved me from," Adrian corrected. "I'm going to tear it down. Every stone, every beam, every hidden room. And in its place, I'm going to build something new, something that belongs to me, something that no one can use against me." He turned to her, his pale eyes soft in the gray afternoon light. "I want you to design it, not just sell it, design it. You know more about architecture than anyone I've ever met. You understand buildings the way I understand people. I want a home, Marla, a real home, and I want you to create it." Marla's breath caught. "Adrian, I'm a real estate agent, not an architect." "You're whatever you want to be," he said. "You've spent your whole life being told what you can't do. I'm telling you what you can do, what you will do, if you let yourself." She looked at the mansion, its granite walls dark with rain, its windows empty and staring. She thought about the hidden room in the basement, the cot and the toilet and the steel door. She thought about Julian Voss, who had smiled at her across the conference table while planning to imprison the man beside her. She thought about Derek Holm, who had mocked her for years and was now unemployed and unemployable. She thought about every client who had looked at her body and decided she wasn't worthy of their business. "Okay," she said, "I'll do it." Adrian smiled, a real smile, the first she'd ever seen from him. It transformed his face, softening the hard lines and cold angles. "I knew you would." The demolition of the Ashford estate began in late autumn. Marla stood on the rocky promontory, watching the machines tear into the stone walls, and felt something loosen in her chest. The hidden room was the first thing to go. She watched the excavator's claw rip through the false wall, exposing the prison cell to daylight for the first time. It was smaller than it had looked on the borescope footage. Smaller and sadder, and utterly powerless in the face of destruction. Frank DeMarco stood beside her, his thermos of coffee in hand. "Hell of a thing," he said. "Spent 40 years inspecting buildings. Never found a secret prison before." "I hope you never find another one," Marla said. "Me too." He took a sip of coffee. "You know, I've seen a lot of agents come and go in this town. Most of them are sharks. They'd sell their grandmother for a commission. You're different. You actually care about the buildings, about what they are, not just what they're worth." "That's why I was never successful," Marla said. "Until now." "You were always successful," Frank said. "You just weren't recognized. There's a difference." Marla smiled. "Thank you, Frank, for everything. Don't mention it. Just invite me to the housewarming when the new place is done." The new house took 2 years to design and build. Marla worked with a team of architects and engineers, but the vision was hers. She designed a home that was open and light, with floor-to-ceiling windows that faced the sea, a library that would have made the original owner weep with envy, and a turret room that served as her private office. There were no hidden rooms, no false walls, no steel doors. Adrian gave her complete creative control. He reviewed the plans, asked questions, made suggestions, but ultimately deferred to her judgment. "You're the expert," he said, again and again. "I trust you." Those 3 words meant more to Marla than any declaration of love. She'd spent her entire career fighting to be trusted, fighting to be seen as competent, fighting to be taken seriously. Adrian Cross, the most dangerous man in Port Viridia, trusted her completely. It was a gift she never took for granted. They moved into the house on a bright June morning, the bay glittering beneath a cloudless sky. Marla stood on the wraparound porch, her hands on the railing, and breathed in the salt air. She was 36 years old, and she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Adrian came up behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Happy?" "Yes," she said. "I really am." "Good." He rested his chin on her shoulder. "I have something for you." He handed her a small velvet box. Marla opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a key. Not a jewelry key, but a real key, brass and heavy, with a tag attached that read, "Vasquez and Cross Properties." "What is this?" "Your own firm," Adrian said. "You're done working for other people. You're done being underestimated. You're going to run the most exclusive real estate agency in the city, and you're going to do it on your terms." Marla stared at the key, her vision blurring. "Adrian, I can't." "You can," he said. "You already have. You saved my life, Marla. You exposed a traitor. You designed this house. You've done more in 2 years than most people do in a lifetime. This is just the next step." She turned in his arms, looking up at his pale eyes. "What about you? What do you get out of this?" "I get you," he said simply. "Happy, successful, safe. That's all I want." Marla kissed him then, standing on the porch of the house she had built, overlooking the bay that had witnessed her greatest triumph. She kissed him and felt the last of her old insecurities crumble away, like the walls of the Ashford estate under the excavator's claw. She was not the desperate agent anymore. She was not the plus-size woman who was overlooked and mocked. She was Marla Vasquez, the woman who saw what others missed, the woman who trusted her instincts, the woman who had earned the devotion of a dangerous man and the respect of an entire city. And she was just getting started. The grand opening of Vasquez and Cross Properties was held on a warm September evening. The office was located in a restored Victorian on Harbor Street. with exposed brick walls, original tin ceilings, and a conference room that overlooked the marina. Marla had personally overseen every detail of the renovation, from the custom shelving in the reception area to the vintage nautical maps that decorated the walls. The guest list was a who's who of Port Viridia's elite. Developers, investors, politicians, and socialites mingled among the champagne flutes and canapes. Vanessa Cho was there, looking slightly uncomfortable in a dress that was too tight. Frank DeMarco was there, holding court in a corner with a group of young architects who hung on his every word. And Adrian Cross was there, standing at Marla's side, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. "Quite a turnout," he murmured. "I'm terrified," Marla admitted. "Don't be. You've faced worse than a room full of rich people." She laughed. "That's true." A woman approached them, tall, elegant, with silver hair and a diamond necklace that probably cost more than Marla's entire wardrobe. She extended her hand to Marla with a warm smile. "Ms. Vasquez, I'm Eleanor Ashford. The Ashford estate was my family's property. I wanted to meet you in person." Marla's stomach flipped. "Mrs. Ashford, I'm so sorry about the estate. I know it must have been difficult to let it go." Eleanor waved a dismissive hand. "Don't be sorry. That house was a burden. My grandparents loved it, but my generation only fought over it. When I heard what you found in the basement, I was horrified. Someone used our family home to plan a kidnapping, a murder, for all we know. You did us a favor by exposing it." "I was just doing my job," Marla said. "No," Eleanor said, her eyes sharp and knowing. "You were doing the right thing. There's a difference. I've followed your career since then. You're exactly the kind of agent this city needs. Someone with integrity. Someone who pays attention." She handed Marla a business card. "I have several properties I'd like you to handle. When you have time, of course." Marla took the card, her hand steady. "I'll make time." Eleanor smiled and drifted away, swallowed by the crowd. Marla looked down at the card, then up at Adrian. "Did you arrange that?" she asked. "I didn't," Adrian said. "Eleanor Ashford does whatever she wants. If she's offering you her business, it's because she respects you, not because of me." Marla tucked the card into her clutch, a warm glow spreading through her chest. She'd spent so many years fighting for scraps, fighting for recognition, fighting just to be seen. Now the recognition was coming from everywhere, from mafia bosses and society matrons, from retired inspectors and young architects, from the very people who had once dismissed her. She looked around the room, at the exposed brick and the tin ceilings and the nautical maps, at the champagne flutes and the canapes, and the glittering guests. This was her firm, her vision, her future. And standing beside her, his hand still resting on her back, was the man who had believed in her when no one else did. The man who had trusted her instincts when everyone called her paranoid. The man who had looked at a plus-size real estate agent and seen a genius. "Thank you," she said quietly. Adrian looked down at her. "For what?" "For seeing me." His pale eyes softened. "I see you, Marla. I've always seen you. I always will." Outside, the lights of Port Viridia glittered against the dark water of the bay. Inside, Marla Vasquez stood in the center of her own success, surrounded by people who finally understood her worth. She was no longer the desperate agent. She was no longer the overlooked woman. She was the most trusted property expert in the city. The woman who had saved a mafia boss from a deadly trap. The woman who had built an empire from nothing but her own intelligence and determination. And she was exactly where she was meant to be.